In my previous post, Comparative Military Abilities, Federation versus Delta Quadrant Void Aliens, I extrapolated on scenarios of the Federation and Cathara invading each other's territory to determine who would have the technological advantage between the two powers. At Warren Reed, 6109 left the comment that it would have been nice if I had discussed scenarios of the Borg versus Cathara, and I kicked myself in the head for not doing it. This episode will be an extension of the previous and extrapolate on Catharan infantry versus Borg drones and Federation security. For background of the extrapolated race seen in the Voyager episode. Night. Watch my post. Borg as a existential force. Links in the description. Thanks for the idea at Warren Reed 6109. Catharan infantry weaponry comparative summary. Effectiveness versus mixed Federation crew and Borg drones. Operational context. Catharan weapons are not designed for battlefield dominance in the Federation sense, nor for adapt or overwhelm logic used by the Borg collective. They are context denial tools, weapons that break coherence, synchronization, and meaning. Against a mixed Federation crew, human, Vulcan, Andorian, Betazoid, these weapons exploit sensory diversity, telepathic variance, reliance on energy-based systems. Against Borg drones, they exploit dependence on collective signal, adaptation loops, energetic predictability, resonance blades and resonance staffs. Crystalline melee weapons vibrating matter out of phase rather than cutting it. Staff variants act as field anchors for nearby Catharans. Typical users strike infantry, resonance blades, commanders, resonance staffs, pros and cons versus Federation crew. Pros: ignore personal shields and armor, overload Vulcan neurodiscipline via harmonic feedback, disorient betazoids, empathic noise. Cons: require close range, less efficient against ranged heavy Starfleet tactics, versus Borg. Pros: bypass adaptive shielding, non-energetic, disrupt regeneration cycles. Cons: physical density can overwhelm if drones mass. Assessment: devastating in corridors and boarding actions, symbolic of Catharan doctrine, precision over volume. Void rifles, graviton compression or neural collapse weapons causing implosive trauma, not burns. Typical users: strike infantry, commanders. Pros and cons versus Federation crew. Pros: cannot be dialed down like phasers, instant incapacitation, bypasses Andorian redundancy and human pain tolerance. Cons: less flexible than Starfleet phasers. Energy draw noticeable to sensors if sustained. Versus Borg. Pros: initial volleys highly effective. Physical collapse harder to adapt to than energy burns. Cons: Borg adaptation eventually reduces lethality. Assessment: Catharan equivalent of a necessary loud tool, used sparingly. Entanglement disruptors. Breaks quantum linked systems, collective cognition, synchronized implants, shared buffers. Typical users: null casters, primary offensive weapon, commanders for area denial. Versus Federation crew. Pros: devastating to betazoids and telepathic coordination. Disrupts tricorders and comm badges. Cons: less lethal, relies on follow-up action. Versus Borg. Pros: one of the most effective Borg counters. Shatters local collective cohesion. Cons: limited radius Borg counter by mass. Assessment: strategic weapon. Against Borg, this is doctrinally preferred. Phase hooks. Micro-tunneling tool that bypass armor, bulkheads, hull plating, and shields. Typical users: strike infantry, void walkers. Pros and cons versus Federation crew. Pros: neutralizes cover and bulkheads. Makes containment fields meaningless. Cons: short range, precision tool, not mass weapon. Versus Borg. Pros: bypass cortical armor and shields, effective against alcoves and nodes. Cons: requires proximity to drones. Assessment: boarding, close range, and sabotage weapon. Surgical, not spectacular. Null grenades. Localized silence fields, no sensors, no sound, no coherent energy transfer. Typical users: null casters, signature weapon. Commanders, used for battlefield reset. Pros and cons versus Federation crew. Pros: shuts down phasers, tricorders, transport locks. Induces panic in untrained crews. Cons: temporarily affects Catharans as well. Requires discipline to exploit. Versus Borg. Pros: catastrophic to Borg coordination. Borg cannot adapt to absence. Cons: physical drones still advance blindly. Assessment: theological weapon as much as tactical. Silence made manifest. Doctrinal insight: against Federation crews, Catharan weapons exploit diversity. Against Borg, they exploit unity. The Federation fights with tools. The Borg fight with systems. The Cathara fight with conditions. Energy can be resisted, silence cannot. Following is a pre-Kurtzman canon comparative military assessment grounded in the Delta Quadrant Void, Star Trek Voyager context, and classic Star Trek lore. The focus is head-to-head small unit engagements between a mixed Starfleet crewman team, human, Vulcan, Andorian, Betazoid, and a single Catharan Voidwalker operating independently. Strategic frame of reference: this assessment assumes a single Catharan Voidwalker, a mixed Starfleet team drawn from the United Federation of Planets, trained to Starfleet standards but not elite special forces. The engagement model is close-quarter shipboard or station combat, corridors, compartments, degraded sensors. Combatant profiles: mixed Starfleet crew, human, Vulcan, Andorian, Betazoid. Starfleet doctrine assumes diversity as force multiplication rather than uniformity. Human. Strengths: improvisation, emotional adaptability, nonlinear tactics. Limitations: baseline humanoid physiology, limited sensory range. Combat role: tactical flexibility, leadership under uncertainty. Vulcan: Strengths, superior strength, reflexes, endurance, disciplined cognition. Limitations, reliance on logic models that assume causality. Combat role, close quarters control, precision fire, nerve strike potential. Andorian. Strengths, high aggression threshold, antennae-based spatial awareness, cold-adapted stamina. Limitations, emotional intensity exploitable by psionic interference. Combat role, shock trooper, point defense, rapid assault. Betazoid. Strengths, empathic, telepathic perception, early threat detection. Limitations, overload risk against non-humanoid cognition. Combat role, early warning, psychological counterintelligence. Collective advantage, cross-species redundancy. Faster recovery from partial casualties. Ability to recognize something is wrong earlier than a monospecies team. Catharan Voidwalker. The Voidwalker is not an infantryman in the Starfleet sense. It is a strategic instrument. Doctrine. Combat is pre-resolved via harmonic modeling. The Voidwalker does not engage. It executes correction. Individual opposition is secondary to system destabilization. Physiology. Void-adapted biometallic exoskeleton. Multispectrum perception, gravitic, EM shadow, pressure discontinuity. Limited psionic projection, not telepathy, but cognitive interference. Psychology. No fear response. No reliance on linear time perception. Resistant to empathy, intimidation, and deception. Engagement phases, head-to-head. Phase 1, detection. Starfleet mixed crew. Betazoid senses absence or distortion rather than a mind. Andorian antennae detect spatial irregularities. Vulcan recognizes logic gaps in sensor data. Result: the mixed crew detects anomalous presence earlier than humans alone. Voidwalker, already aware of the crew before detection occurs. Detection is irrelevant. Engagement timing is controlled. Phase 2. First contact. Starfleet. Phaser fire initiated, stun or kill. Vulcan and Andorian take point. Betazoid attempts psychic red, receives feedback void or dissonance. Voidwalker. Phase shifted evasion. Local gravity or inertia distortion disrupts aim. One crew member neutralized without visible weapon discharge. Result: Starfleet loses tempo immediately. Phase 3, close quarters. Starfleet advantages. Vulcan nerve strike can work if contact is achieved. Andorian resilience allows brief survivability under gravitic stress. Human improvisation may weaponize environment, doors, force fields. Betazoid can warn of imminent action milliseconds early. Voidwalker advantages. Armor disperses phaser energy. Resonant melee weapons bypass physical strength. Psychological destabilization compounds species differences. Result: against a monospecies team, Voidwalker dominance is absolute. Against a mixed team, dominance is high but no longer effortless. Phase 3, likely outcomes. 1. Voidwalker versus 4-person mixed crew. Catharan victory likely. Casualties on both sides possible. Void Walker will disengage once virus insertion is met. Repeated engagements. Starfleet adapts faster over time. Catharan success rate declines with exposure. Comparative military assessment. Borg drones versus Cathara Void Walker. Strategic frame. This assessment examines head-to-head infantry-scale engagements between Borg drones of the Borg Collective and a single Cathara Void Walker, drawing on the Delta Quadrant Void, Voyager episode, Night, and pre-Kurtzman canon logic, TNG and DS9. Key contrast. Borg dominate through adaptation, redundancy, and mass. Void Walkers dominate through pre-calculated insertion, phase control, and resonance warfare. This is not persistence versus persistence. It is adaptation versus irrelevance. Borg profile. Borg drones. Doctrine. Advance, sample, adapt, assimilate. Accept losses as data acquisition. Strengths. Rapid adaptation to energy and particle weapons. Collective cognition, no fear, no morale collapse. Regeneration and redundancy. Dependencies. Coherent EM/subspace signaling. Predictable cause-effect feedback loops. Physical or energetic interaction to enable adaptation. Detection and first contact. Borg. Register Void Walker as sensor noise or phase anomaly. Drones advance to acquire data. Void Walker. Borg presence identified before contact. Target density, approach vectors, and exit path already selected. Advantage, Void Walker, initiative is total. Initial engagement, first 10 to 20 seconds. Borg action. Adaptive shielding deployed. Nanoprobes prepared for assimilation attempt. Void Walker action. Phase-shifted evasion negates line of sight. Resonant disruption desynchronizes drone timing. One or more drones neutralized without direct energy exchange. Result: Borg attempt adaptation. No stable frequency or signal to adapt to. Close quarters dynamics. Borg. Continue advancing regardless of losses. Adaptation improves marginally against energetic components. Collective coherence degrades locally due to timing slip and phase mismatch. Void Walker. Moves through formations, not against them. Uses resonance blades or phase shear strikes that ignore shields, bypass regeneration cycles. Withdraws before drones can establish meaningful counter patterns. Critical insight. Borg adaptation requires repetition. Void Walker lethality does not repeat. Final assessment. Head-to-head outcome. Tactical engagement, Void Walker favored. Sustained mass contact, Borg endure, Void Walker withdraws. Assimilation risk, negligible for Void Walker. Why this matchup favors the Void Walker. Borg strength, adaptation, is bypassed, not challenged. Void Walker lethality does not present a stable pattern. The Borg cannot adapt to being out of phase with reality. The Borg declare, resistance is futile. The Void Walker replies, resistance was never engaged. Conclusion. In direct combat, a Cathara Voidwalker does not defeat the Borg by superior force, but by making the Borg's greatest strength irrelevant. Following is a formal head-to-head comparative military assessment grounded in pre-Kurtzman Star Trek canon and the analytical framework established in the book Through the Black Curtain, the Cathara, Voyager, and the Borg. Scope is tactical ground and shipboard combat, not fleet warfare. Scenario definition: Force A, Starfleet. One mixed species Starfleet fire team, human. Vulcan. Andorian. Betazoid. Standard Starfleet training and Type 2/3 phasers. Ethical constraints remain in place. Force B, Cathara. 1 Catharan commander. 3 Catharan strike infantry. Operating within Catharan doctrine. Resonance warfare, silence, non-linear engagement. Strategic context assumes Starfleet personnel of the United Federation of Planets encountering a Catharan military unit without prior intelligence on Catharan doctrine. Starfleet mixed crew. Decentralized initiative but hierarchical decision-making. Species diversity creates redundant perception channels. Requires verbal orders. Sensor confirmation. Ethical authorization to escalate. Strength, adaptability, and improvisation. Weakness. Reaction time and coordination lag under sensory disruption. Catharan commander plus strike infantry. Commander functions as a harmonic anchor. Infantry are neural linked, not verbally commanded. Tactical decisions are pre-resolved through resonance modeling. Strength, instantaneous coordination. Weakness, dependence on commander cohesion. Detection phase. Starfleet. Betazoid detects absence or emotional null, first warning. Andorian antennae register spatial distortion. Vulcan identifies logical inconsistencies in sensor data. Human integrates conflicting cues into a threat hypothesis. Mixed crew detects anomaly earlier than monospecies teams, but not intent. Catharan. Starfleet detected before engagement. Detection is irrelevant. Catharan commander has already selected one of the following: neutralization, repurposing, erasure. Advantage: Catharan. Initial contact, first 10 to 15 seconds. Catharan action. Commander deploys null resonance envelope. Strike infantry phase insert at offset vectors. Target priorities: Betazoid, perceptual threat. Vulcan, control threat. Andorian, kinetic threat. Human, adaptive threat. Starfleet response. Phaser fire initiated. Vulcan and Andorian take forward positions. Betazoid experiences cognitive feedback, not telepathic resistance, cognitive erasure. Tempo collapses immediately for Starfleet. Close quarters engagement. Species-specific performance. Vulcan. Physical strength allows brief parity. Nerve strike can disrupt strike infantry if contact achieved. Fails against commander's resonance field. Andorian. exceptional aggression and endurance, can force a strike infantry into mutual destruction, highly vulnerable to neural mirage emitters. Betazoid, early warning by seconds, not victory. Severe overload risk, often incapacitated first. Human. Environmental weaponization possible. Force fields. Decompression. Power feedback. Only species likely to attempt non-doctrinal tactics. Catharan strike infantry. Individually superior to any single Starfleet crewman, designed for coordinated overwhelm, not duels. Silence, speed, and resonance weapons negate phasers. Catharan commander. Does not fight first. Maintains battlefield coherence. Can incapacitate multiple opponents through cognitive desynchronization. Likely outcomes: 4-person mixed crew versus commander +3, strike infantry. Outcome probability: Catharan decisive victory, 85 to 90%. Starfleet survival depends on immediate environmental exploitation, rapid isolation of commander, willingness to abandon doctrine, casualties. Starfleet, severe to total incapacitation. Catharan, possible loss of 1 strike infantry in best Starfleet case. Strategic note: if the commander is neutralized early, strike infantry lose harmonic cohesion and effectiveness drops sharply. This is the only viable Starfleet win condition. Final assessment: a Catharan commander with 3 strike infantry is not an infantry unit in Federation terms. It is a localized strategic instrument. Mixed species Starfleet crews perform far better than monospecies units. They delay Catharan objectives but rarely overturn them. Victory for Starfleet requires abandonment of ethical pacing, environmental extremity, acceptance of high casualties. Starfleet fights to protect lives. The Cathara fight to preserve silence. In head-to-head engagements, silence wins, unless Starfleet learns to weaponize unpredictability as ruthlessly as the Cathara weaponize harmony. Borg drones versus Cathara commander with 3 strike infantry. Sources and frame. This assessment synthesizes pre-Kurtzman Star Trek canon TNG DS9 Voyager with the operational doctrine and technologies defined in Through the Black Curtain, the Cathara, Voyager, and the Borg. Scope is tactical, head-to-head ground and shipboard combat, corridors, nodes, alcoves, not fleet engagements. Combatants: Borg drones collective, doctrine, close, sample, adapt, assimilate. Strengths: redundancy, rapid energetic adaptation, fearless advance, regenerative persistence. Dependencies: coherent subspace and EM signaling, synchronized timing, feedback loops for adaptation. Entity: Borg collective. Cathara assault cell. Composition: 1 commander plus 3 strike infantry. Doctrine: resonant denial, isolation, decisive neutralization. Strengths: neural linked coordination, non-energetic disruption, commander-anchored coherence. Dependencies: commander presence for peak synchrony, prefers small controlled battle spaces. Command and control: Borg, Distributed hive control. Losses are amortized. Coordination persists so long as signal coherence remains. Cathara. The commander acts as a harmonic anchor. Strike infantry move as a choreographed unit without speech. Orders are pre-resolved in resonance space. Edge. Cathara at first contact, faster coherence. Borg over time, persistence at scale. Detection and first contact. Borg. Anomaly flagged as environmental noise, drones advance to sample. Cathara. Enemy presence already classified via resonance echoes. Commander selects vectors and priorities before physical contact. Edge Cathara initiative. Opening exchange 0 to 20 seconds. Cathara action. Commander establishes a resonance suppression envelope. Sensor legibility degrades, timing slips. Strike infantry phase insert laterally, splitting drone attention and open fire with void rifles, obliterating initial Borg drones. Borg response. Adaptive shields engage. Early adaptation attempts stall due to unstable feedback, non-energetic effects. Edge, Cathara, tempo collapse for Borg. Close quarters dynamics. Borg. Continue advancing despite losses. Regeneration alcoves destabilize locally under resonance pressure. Adaptation improves against energetic strikes, not against coherence denial. Cathara strike infantry. Resort to resonance blades as Borg partially adapt to kinetic assault, bypassing armor and shielding. Neural mirage effects cause mistargeting and staggered drone motion. 3 infantry operate as one body, switching to creating kill zones rather than duels. Commander rarely strikes first, maintains field coherence. Incapacitates multiple drones using entanglement disruptor. The commander prioritizes stalling the collective rather than annihilation. Edge, Cathara locally, Borg if allowed to mass. Final assessment. Head-to-head, tactical, Cathara favored. Sustained contact and massing, Borg favored. Assimilation risk, low for Cathara. Denial prevents sampling. Doctrine clash, persistence versus precision. The Borg say, resistance is futile. The Cathara reply, resistance requires coherence. Comparative military assessment. Mixed Starfleet crew versus Cathara null caster. Combatants defined. Mixed Starfleet crew, human, Vulcan, Andorian, Betazoid, operating under United Federation of Planets doctrine. Core assumption of Starfleet doctrine. Combat is intelligible. Threats can be sensed. Systems will function. Cause-effect response remains intact. Species contributions. Human, improvisation, adaptive problem-solving, ethical flexibility under stress. Vulcan, superior strength, discipline, resistance to panic and fear. Andorian, high aggression tolerance, antennae-based spatial sensing, shock response. Betazoid, empathic and telepathic early warning and morale stabilization. Strength of the unit. Redundant perception, cognitive diversity, resilience against psychological collapse. Cathara null caster, solo operator. A null caster is not infantry and not an assault unit. It is a battlespace denial specialist. Primary function: suppress the conditions that allow combat to occur. Doctrine: does not seek kills, does not seek dominance, enforces silence, inertia, and perceptual collapse. Key distinction: Voidwalkers fight enemies, Nullcasters erase conflict itself. Nature of nullcasting: nullcasting attacks 3 Starfleet dependencies simultaneously: energy coherence, phaser charge destabilization, inconsistent power delivery, force fields degrade or fail. Sensor legibility: EM, gravimetric, and subspace readings collapse into noise. No reliable targeting solutions. Cognitive synchronization. Temporal lag between perception and action. Disrupted motor response. Shared awareness fractures. To Starfleet personnel, the space feels dead, paused, or muted, not hostile. Engagement phases. Phase 1, detection. Starfleet mixed crew. Betazoid senses emotional absence rather than threat. Andorian antennae register pressure without direction. Vulcan identifies irreconcilable sensor contradictions. Human recognizes pattern failure rather than a target. The crew detects anomaly, not intent. Nullcaster. Detection irrelevant. Null envelope already active or activating. Advantage, nullcaster, decisive. Phase 2, null field onset. Immediate effects. Phaser reliability drops sharply. Communication latency spikes. Reaction time desynchronizes between crew members. Betazoid experiences empathic whiteout. Species-specific impact. Human, disoriented, but adapts fastest. Vulcan, mental discipline holds, but logic models fail. Andorian, aggression blunted by sensory deprivation. Betazoid, often incapacitated first. Starfleet loses initiative without a shot fired. Phase 3, close quarters. Starfleet options. Vulcan physical force can damage the nullcaster if contact occurs. Andorian attempts brute force engagement. Human may attempt environmental weaponization. Manual overrides decompression. Betazoid offers minimal utility once the null field deepens. Nullcaster behavior avoids direct combat, increases null density, isolates individuals through perceptual collapse, utilizes entanglement disruptor on crew members that attempt close quarters engagement. Objective: freeze, fragment, neutralize. The engagement becomes asymmetrical to the point of abstraction. Mixed crew versus single nullcaster. Nullcaster success probability 90 to 95%. Starfleet casualties, low lethality, high incapacitation. Survival possible. Victory unlikely. Only viable Starfleet success conditions. Immediate environmental extremity, hard vacuum, radiation surge. Physical neutralization via sustained contact. Rapid withdrawal from the null envelope. Even then, the nullcaster typically disengages once denial is achieved. Strategic interpretation. If a Voidwalker represents Catharan will, a Nullcaster represents Catharan law. It does not conquer. It declares, this space does not permit conflict. Against a mixed Starfleet crew, arguably the Federation's strongest baseline infantry configuration, the Nullcaster does not need to win. It only needs to make winning impossible. Final assessment: mixed crews outperform monospecies units. They resist panic longer and adapt creatively. But Nullcasters are purpose-built to defeat. Diversity, initiative, technology-dependent combat. Head-to-head result: Starfleet survives. Cathara controls the battle space. Starfleet asks, how do we fight? The Nullcaster answers, you don't. The one Federation species uniquely resistant to null casting. The only Federation species that demonstrates intrinsic resistance, not immunity but structural resistance, to Catharan null casting is the El-Aurian. This resistance is not technological, trained, or doctrinal. It is ontological. What null casting actually attacks: null casting defeats opponents by removing three things simultaneously: signal, energy, EM, subspace, telepathy, synchronization, shared timing, coordinated cognition, causal legibility, clear cause and effect. Most Federation species, even Vulcans and Betazoids, depend on at least one of these. El-Aurians do not. El-Aurians do not rely on signal. They rely on presence. Canon establishes that El-Aurians possess anomalous perceptual awareness, sensitivity to temporal disturbances, the ability to sense wrongness without data. Guinan repeatedly detects timeline fractures, reality shifts, non-local threats, without sensors, telepathy, or energy exchange. Null casting erases signal. El-Aurians do not need it. El-Aurians are asynchronous by nature. Null casting works best against beings who must remain in phase with their environment. El-Aurians are not bound tightly to linear time, retain awareness across altered timelines, maintain identity despite causal discontinuity. In TNG canon, Guinan remembers what should have been, detects altered realities without explanation, maintains continuity when others reset. Null casting causes desynchronization. El-Aurians are already partially desynchronized and stable. El-Aurians register null casters as wrong, not absent. To most species, a null caster feels like silence, dead space, nothing happening. To an El-Aurian, it feels like something that should be here isn't behaving correctly. This is a critical difference. Nullcasters rely on the enemy mistaking absence for safety or confusion. El-Aurians do not misinterpret absence. They experience it as tension. Why the Federation never realizes this fully? Starfleet and Section 31 both misunderstand El-Aurians because their abilities are passive. They produce no measurable output. They refuse to formalize doctrine. El-Aurians do not brief admirals. They pour drinks, give advice, and leave rooms early. Nullcasters defeat systems. El-Orians survive by never becoming one. What resistance actually looks like in practice. An El-Orian in a null-casting zone will experience discomfort, not paralysis. Avoid the most dangerous spaces instinctively. Advise withdrawal before doctrine triggers. They will not counterattack, attempt containment. Try to understand the phenomenon, and that restraint preserves their advantage. Final assessment. El-Orians are uniquely resistant to null casting because they do not depend on signal. They tolerate temporal and causal discontinuity. They perceive absence as information. They act without forcing iteration. Nullcasters erase the battlefield. Voidwalkers erase the fight. El-Orians notice something is wrong and leave. In Catharan terms, that makes El-Orians unclassifiable. And in warfare against denial, the unclassifiable is the most dangerous thing of all. Cathara nullcasters versus Borg drones. Strategic frame. This assessment evaluates head-to-head contact between a single Cathara nullcaster and Borg drones operating under the Borg Collective. Scope is tactical ground and shipboard engagement, corridors, alcoves, junctions, not fleet actions. Key premise difference: nullcasters deny the conditions of combat. Borg overwhelm through adaptation and persistence. Combatant profiles: Cathara nullcaster, solo. Role: battlespace denial specialist. Method: nullcasting, suppression of energy coherence, sensor legibility, and cognitive synchronization. Doctrine: enforce silence, disengage once denial is achieved. Strengths: non-energetic effects, not easily adapted to. No reliance on comms or tempo. Low lethality, high incapacitation. Limitations: best against localized densities. Less effective where sheer mass can brute force proximity. Borg drones. Role: modular cybernetic infantry. Method: rapid iteration, redundancy, adaptation. Doctrine: close distance, analyze, neutralize, assimilate. Strengths: collective cognition, extreme redundancy, rapid adaptation to energetic threats. Limitations: dependence on subspace and EM coherence. Timing synchronization. Command signal integrity. Engagement phases. Phase 1, detection. Borg. Register anomaly as environmental noise. No fear, no hesitation. Drones advance to sample. Nullcaster. Detection irrelevant. Null envelope already forming. Advantage nullcaster. Phase 2, null field onset. Effects on Borg systems. Interdrone synchronization degrades. Subspace carrier signals attenuate. Neural timing slips between drones. Regeneration cycles destabilize. Observed Borg behavior. Drones pause mid-action. Movement becomes staggered, asynchronous. Adaptation attempts fail due to lack of stable input. Key insight: the Borg cannot adapt to nothing. Phase 3, close contact. Borg response. Physical advance continues. Drones act increasingly as individual units. Assimilation attempts become clumsy or misaligned. Nullcaster behavior. Avoids direct combat. Increases null density. Uses entanglement disruptor on Borg that attempt assimilation. Allows drones to desynchronize themselves. Outcome. Drones remain functional but ineffective. Collective advantage collapses locally. Strategic interpretation. From a Catharan perspective, the Borg are not enemies. They are noise. Borg rely on coherence. Nullcasters deny coherence. Neither can decisively annihilate the other at infantry scale. Outcome: Borg advance stalls. Nullcaster mission succeeds. Neither side assimilates the other. Final assessment: Nullcasters versus Borg drones is one of the few matchups where the Borg cannot adapt their way to victory. The Borg lose their greatest strength, unity. The Nullcaster achieves denial, not destruction. Engagement ends without conquest. The Borg say, resistance is futile. The Nullcaster replies, resistance requires signal. Result: some Borg survive. Cathara withdraw. The space remains silent. This concludes my comparison and breakdown on Catharan infantry. For more information on the Cathara, watch my other episodes. Links in the description. Or even better, purchase my book, Beyond the Dark Curtain, The Cathara, Voyager, and the Borg, where I go into detail on the Cathara and how their technology and culture were influenced by exposure to the Borg. Audiobook editions can be purchased at audiobooks.com, Everand, Kobo, B, and N, Audiobooks, Spotify, TuneIn, Bibliotheca, and Overdrive. Book editions can be purchased at Amazon, Apple, Barnes & Nobles, Kobo, and Google Books. Until next time. Peace.